Hope your week is off to a great start. I'm Min San here with our panel of foreign journalists. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
Thanks.
High-level officials from Seoul and Pyongyang met for talks early last week, marking the first such cross-border dialogue in more than 2 years. We have details in our first report. On January 9th at 10 a.m., a high-level meeting between the two Koreas was held at the Peace House located in the truce village of Panmunjom. This is the first inter-Korean meeting to be held in more than 2 years, with the last one taking place in December of 2015. North Korea's participation in the upcoming PyeongChang Winter Olympics was the focal point of the meeting, but many other important agendas were also discussed, as it was the first such opportunity for dialogue between the two sides in a very long time.
평창 동계 올림픽 참가 문제와 관련해서 북측은 고위급 대표단과 민족올림픽위원회 대표단, 선수단, 응원단 등을 파견하겠다는 입장을 밝혔습니다. 아울러 북측은 한반도의 평화적 환경을 보장하고 민족적인 화해와 단합을 도모하며 남북 사이에 제기되는 모든 문제들을 남북 간의 대화와 협상을 통해 풀어나가자고 얘기했습니다.
Signs of thawing tensions between the two Koreas were first detected on January 1st, when North Korean leader Kim Jong-un delivered his New Year's address.
남조선에서 머지않아 열리는 겨울철 올림픽 경기대회에 대해 말한다면 그것은 민족의 위상을 과시하는 좋은 계기로 될 것이며 우리는 대표단 파견을 포함하여 필요한 조치를 취할 용의가 있으며
The South Korean government and the Presidential Office of Cheongwade immediately welcomed the move and reaffirmed their willingness to hold dialogue at any time and place. On January 2nd, President Moon Jae-in ordered that follow-up measures be quickly drawn up in order to accommodate North Korea's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The following day, on January 3rd, an inter-Korean emergency hotline in the truce village of Panmunjom was reopened after 23 months. On January 4th, Presidents Moon Jae-in and Donald Trump held phone talks and agreed to suspend joint military drills between South Korea and the United States during the Winter Olympics. Finally, on the morning of January 5th, Pyongyang accepted Seoul's request to hold a high-level inter-Korean meeting on January 9th, an astounding development which occurred just 4 days after Kim Jong-un's New Year's address. After their meeting on January 9th, the delegations representing the two Koreas released a joint statement which included confirmation of North Korea's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics.
시정일관 진지하고 우호적인 분위기에서 진행될 수 있었습니다. 한반도 긴장 완화의 계기를 만들었다고 생각합니다.
Amid high public interest, a close eye is being maintained on further developments to see whether or not this latest meeting will prove to be an inflection point in the situation on the Korean peninsula. So what were your initial thoughts upon hearing of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's willingness to send a team to the PyeongChang Winter Olympics?
Well, I think his expression of willingness in the New Year's speech this year from Kim Jong-un really represents a shift into a cycle of dialogue from North Korea. I think maybe it feels that it has enough of a nuclear deterrent now not to have to worry as much about some type of preemptive strike or military action from the United States. And so it wants to see a weakening of the sanctions. Participation of North Korea in the Olympics will, I think, weaken the argument for sanctions against Pyongyang. And I think it even opens up the possibility that there could be a cap or a moratorium on testing from North Korea if we see a suspension of military drills involving the U.S. and South Korea that really, provoke North Korea, I feel, so much.
Compared to his previous addresses, what did you notice as a major difference? The media here spoke about the deep bow that he made before the address, which was a gesture that was absent in his previous addresses.
Yeah, well, first of all, he talked a lot about economics.
about North Korean economics and the need to develop them. He mentioned all parts of that, like chemical industry, like iron industry, etc.
지난해 국가경제 발전 5개년 전략 수행에서도 커다란 전진을 이룩하였습니다. 화학공업의 자립적 토대를 강화하고 5개년 전략의 화학고지를 점령할 수 있는 전망을 열어놓았습니다.
That was one of the biggest focuses of the speech. But then he switched to interKorean affairs, and that was quite interesting. He didn't sound hostile. I didn't expect him to propose like that dialogue. This is something really strange, because before that only Moon Jae-in was pushing for dialogue, and it seemed like North Korea was very reluctant to do that. So it was a significant change from the previous years.
I see. Frank, how would you evaluate the recent talks between Seoul and Pyongyang?
I think they were the best that could be expected. I mean, it was within hours that we had reports that North Korea had agreed to attend the Olympic Games. I didn't expect that to happen right away. I thought that they would just exchange information, exchange some documents, say that they had a good meeting. Maybe that would have been really good in itself, and then maybe a follow-up meeting in which they came to the agreement that the North Korean delegation would visit the Olympics. Now we have reports saying that North Korea is planning on sending 400 or 500 people to the Olympic Games. So I really don't think that you could have had a better result than what came out of that meeting on January 9th.
Has it served to ease tensions then?
Of course it did, and the timing was very good. You know, Kim Jong-un did a very good job. Because it's only 30 days left until the Olympics, and I know that Moon Jae-in and the South Korean government was very worried about the possible North Korean provocations during the Olympics. And now North Korea's participation in the Olympics guarantees that there will be no provocations and nothing can, spoil that spirit, festive spirit during the Olympics. So, yeah, I think South Korea didn't have any chance just to refuse.
Right. Mickey, do you suppose the latest talks would also possibly pave the path to a meeting between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the future?
Yes, maybe it could happen, but I don't think South Korea should too much hurry up for the negotiation. Of course, President Moon Jae-in wants to have the summit with Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un also want to have the summit with President Moon Jae-in, but don't have to be hurry.
You think there needs to be a more cautious pace then?
Yes.
I see. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, I think it'll be tough for Moon Jae-in to meet with Kim Jong-un right away. Again, let's enjoy the Olympic Games, and then after the Olympic Games, I think there might have to be some movement on sanctions before there could be a summit meeting, and a summit meeting is going to be probably frowned upon by U.S. President Donald Trump and Shinzo Abe in Japan, whether it happens, concurrent with sanctions or after sanctions or at any time. But I think that they would just have to, accept that. So later in the year or later in Moon Jae-in's term, I think for sure a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un would be a good thing and a necessary thing. It's been, I think, more than a decade now since the last summit between the leaders of North and South Korea. So I think it would be a good thing, certainly, for a summit, and a necessary thing for the Moon Jae-in administration.
Some critics claim that such acts of goodwill from the North Korean leader is an attempt or are attempts to create a divide of sorts between Seoul and Washington. What are your thoughts, Stan?
Yeah, I think that's quite plausible, given the fact that this kind of things happened many times since the beginning of 1990s. That's why I think that it's not quite a sincere suggestion just because Kim Jong-un wants to have good relations with South Korea all of a sudden. Last year was really tough for North Korea. It found it in a situation under really strong sanctions. And if those sanctions will be faithfully fulfilled by the participants, then I think North Korea is, its economy first of all could collapse, because all the trade, all the foreign currency will be blocked. And in this situation, probably Kim Jong-un decided that it's time to use the North Koreans' trick, that is starting negotiation and trying to using this negotiation as a tool to buy some either time or cancellation of certain sanctions, etc. So I think they're going to use that to pull that trick again.
Yeah. Weakening the effect of the sanction is one of the main purposes of these dialogues, because some experts say that because of the sanctions, North Korea is quite, the economic situation is quite serious, becoming serious. So Kim Jong-un decided to that some timing to weaken the sanctions by starting a dialogue with South Korea and separating South Korea and some international countries.
I see.
I agree with these guys a little bit, but I think we need to recognize that South Korea and the United States have different policies toward North Korea. There is a division in their strategies toward North Korea. Moon Jae-in was elected on the campaign promise that he was going to engage North Korea and kind of unconditionally. So despite the hardline strategy that's taken by Washington, Moon Jae-in has succeeded in his engagement strategy, and we saw that bear fruit with the negotiations and North Korea participating in the Olympics. I want to give North Korea a little bit of credit. Kim Jong-un is a little bit of a sports fan, so I think that might have motivated him a bit to get his team at the Olympic Games as well.
Do they play basketball during the Winter Olympics?
That's a good question.
What are your thoughts about Seoul and Washington's decision to postpone the military drills, at least not continue them during the PyeongChang Winter Olympics?
Actually, I expected that. It was a little bit strange because South Korean and the United States officials would say that, no, we are not talking about that, we are not negotiating that. But I think, yeah, it's certainly cancellation of those military drills probably did influence Kim Jong-un's decision to propose the settlement of inter-Korean relationships.
Absolutely.
Because this is the thing that North Koreans wanted for a long time.
Absolutely. I think we need to be reminded it was Moon Jae-in that proposed the delay in these South Korea-U.S. military drills that are so, aggressively attacked and criticized by North Korea. The U.S. had absolutely no choice but to delay these drills. How could you have large-scale U.S.-South Korean military drills aimed at North Korea take place during an Olympic Games in which North Korea was participating? That would be ridiculous. And I think certainly Stan points to the fact that delaying those drills paved the way for North Korea, again, to accept the invitation to attend the Olympic Games. I think the question is what's going to happen after the Olympic Games? Are these drills going to take place in April, or could we see something like China's proposal come through, which is a suspension for suspension, where the drills are suspended and North Korea suspends its nuclear and missile testing, and then we might see some negotiations possible.
And only time will tell, of course. In our second report, we take a look at the international response to the latest inter-Korean talks. The first inter-Korean meeting to be held in more than 2 years garnered a high level of interest from corners of the world. The United States, which has been keeping close tabs on the situation on the Korean peninsula, expressed a message of support for the cross-border meeting. On January 4th, President Donald Trump went on Twitter and took personal credit for the successful arrangement of the meeting, claiming that it would not have been possible if he hadn't been, quote, strong, firm and willing to commit the total might of the United States against North Korea. A few days later, on January 7th, he expressed his support for the inter-Korean meeting and wished for a fruitful outcome.
I very much want to see it work out between the two countries. I'd like to see them getting involved in the Olympics and maybe things go from there. So I'm behind that 100%.
During a regular press briefing on January 8th, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Liu Kang said Beijing welcomes and supports the positive moves taken by South and North Korea. However, the reaction in Japan was slightly different and ambivalent, expressing hope and displaying caution in equal measure on the inter-Korean meeting. On January 7th, during an interview with NHK, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe welcomed North Korea's participation in the upcoming Winter Olympics, but emphasized the need for more concrete action and said there was little use for, quote, dialogue for the sake of dialogue. Meanwhile, foreign media outlets from around the world were quick on their feet to provide in-depth coverage of the inter-Korean talks and the agendas on the table. With regard to North Korea's decision to take part in the upcoming Winter Olympics, the New York Times described it as a symbolic breakthrough after months of escalating tensions over Pyongyang's rapidly advancing nuclear and missile programs. BBC reported that despite the sudden and dramatic change after months of tensions, few people in South Korea believe this indicates a fundamental shift in Pyongyang's position. The inter-Korean meeting was held under close watch by neighbouring countries, which have expressed a mixture of hope, anticipation and concern. Now, as revealed in the report, US President Donald Trump has claimed that it was his hardline policy that made the inter-Korean talks possible this time around. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, I think that's kind of ridiculous. I think that Trump's policy and U.S. foreign policy historically is responsible for North Korea's military development. It's absurd to think that Trump really had an effect on this. It was Moon Jae-in's engagement policy in the Olympics themselves and a decision made by Kim Jong-un to engage South Korea on this issue. I feel U.S. foreign policy here is really provoking tension in the region.
Do you believe that President Moon Jae-in's two-track approach on North Korea is bearing fruit then?
Sure, absolutely. You know, I think he's tread a very careful line very effectively, maintaining a U.S. alliance with a hawkish American president while somehow managing to engage North Korea. That was a tremendous challenge so far that he seems to have somehow navigated into engagement with North Korea. The trick will be what will happen after the Olympic Games. I really feel that the Games offered some vehicle for that engagement, and then moving beyond that, the other issues are more sort of intractable. The security issues in North Korea's nuclear and missile development, and the American, demand that they give up that or put that on the table to be given up in order for negotiations to take place, I think now is somewhat unrealistic.
At least one of the two tracks of Moon Jae-in's policy is working, as we can see now, as the engagement with North Korea. But we'll see what will happen after the Olympics, and especially what will happen to this denuclearization policy. How will North Korea react to that? Because during these talks, I think South Korean side tried to raise that question, and they got really harsh answer from the North Korean side that we're not going to discuss the denuclearization now.
Stan, Beijing has welcomed the talks between the two Koreas, and they've also expressed hopes for the resumption of the six-party nuclear talks. What, in your opinion, are the chances of a resumption of the multilateral talks?
The chances are still there, but I think it will take some time. It's really difficult to say now what's going to happen. I think we should just wait after the Olympics and then we'll see what shall North Korea do. Probably six-party talks is not a bad idea, and it worked quite well in this format in previous years. Although I'm not sure if North Korea would agree this time for the six-party talks. Maybe they are more interested in bilateral talks with the United States. They were always, pushing for that, and maybe bilateral talks with South Korea.
I see. Right, so while Beijing welcomed the talks, Japan on the other side has been a little ambivalent with regard to the talks, a bit more cautious. Tell us a bit about the response from the Japanese government.
Well, we actually welcome the dialogue itself. It's going to be a good chance to ease the tension of the Korean Peninsula, but we're still doubtful about that this calm situation will go on so long. Japanese concern is that the dialogue going to weaken the alliance between Japan, South Korea, and United States, and this is one of the big purposes of the North Korea Kim Jong-un. So we are still quite doubtful about the dialogue, and this situation will go on so long.
I see. Stan, what's the response from Moscow regarding the latest talks?
Well, the response is quite cheerful. The Kremlin said that that probably the negotiation is the only possible way to solve the North Korean nuclear issue, and that it should go on, and all the interested sides should push for further, dialogue.
So Kremlin also supports the idea of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula.
Right. Yeah.
I see. Given the dramatic shift here on the peninsula, in light of the latest talks, there are also hopes for a resumption in operations at the Kaesong industrial complex, which the current administration claims was unilaterally shut down by the previous Park Geun-hye administration. What are the chances of such a reality?
I think we need to wait and see until after the Olympic Games. In terms of those negotiations that took place on January 9th, keeping denuclearization of the peninsula off of the table, I think, was a good call by North Korea. And I think that South Korea kind of mentioned that for Tokyo and Washington. That was political communication to them so that they knew that South Korea was on board trying to denuclearize North Korea. They probably knew what the North Korean negotiator would do and just kind of cast that aside.
What are the chances of peaceful negotiations to ensure a nuclear-free peninsula, in your opinion, Stan?
It's hard to say. As have already been mentioned, that North Korea really invested too much into its nuclear and missile program. And what is worse, that North Korea really considers its nuclear weapons as a guarantee that it wouldn't be attacked by any other side, particularly the United States. And they see it as a tool for the regime's survival, which is why they are not going to give it up easily.
Sorry, I wanted to get back to your question about the Kaesong Industrial Complex and Mount Kumgang and the reopening of those. That's another issue that I think needs to kind of wait and see. Because of the sanctions, the international community is not going to agree to reopening those. And then the potential for military drills taking place with the US and South Korea maybe in April would be another sort of roadblock preventing greater reconciliation between North and South Korea. But the potential for reopening those can give the South Korean government more strength in leading the rapprochement between North and South Korea and the international community toward North Korea. If the Moon Jae-in administration pushes North Korea to get those reopened and pushes the international community to accept that, you might be able to see some sanctions relief, military drills not happen, a suspension for suspension take place, and greater potential for negotiations concerning a peace treaty and a change in the tension that we've seen on the Korean Peninsula, particularly in 2017.
What should we do to advance this atmosphere of goodwill on the Korean Peninsula?
In this case, I think the first and the major thing is that both sides have to continue talking to each other. Just whatever happens, be at the negotiation table, and it's not like talking just for the sake of talking. During the conversation, always, it goes somewhere. It leads somewhere. Both sides can state their what they want. Even if it takes like 1 or 2 or 3 years, the rapprochement anyway would take place, and the sides would understand each other's needs more. And
so keep the dialogue channel open.
Keep the dialogue open. Yeah.
I disagree a little bit. I believe in talking for the sake of talking and not testing. And what happened during the agreed framework and during the six-party talks is you had North Korea not testing so much. Even though you felt that you weren't making, I'm sure 5 parties of the six-party talks felt that they weren't making the kind of progress they wanted. North Korea wasn't testing nuclear devices and ballistic missiles at the rate when those talks weren't taking place. So just getting them at the table kind of can really reduce tensions, and if it doesn't lead to greater peace initiatives.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. During cross-border talks last Tuesday, Seoul's Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun highlighted the proverb, "What's well begun is half done," to address the atmosphere of goodwill here on the peninsula. With this in mind, let's hope the latest talks set the stage for many more future talks to ensure a sense of peace and prosperity across the region. Thank you for watching.